unintentionally within their business, there will be people who are effectively have objectives which are still single channel or multi-channel, and so they're good people trying to do a good job, but fundamentally they're not interested in what's going over there because they're delivering on their objective here, and that leads to a disconnected customer experience when you have people, lots of people, all good people trying to do the right thing, but they're doing it against the wrong or not joined up objectives.
Hello and welcome to a whole new episode of the Engati CX show. I'm your host Chandni, and today we have a customer experience expert with us on the show. But before I introduce you to our guest, allow me to introduce you to the magic of Engati. Engati is the world's leading multilingual no-code digital CX platform available across 14 channels with 45,000 solutions created across 187 countries in every domain and use case. Engati has also been recognized as a top platform by Inc.com, TechWorld, CIO, and many others. We run the Engati blog, video channel, and the Engati CX podcast, receiving upwards of 4 lakh visitors annually. And now, for our guest, Peter Lavers is the Director of Customer Attuned, recognized as one of the world's top influencers in B2C and B2B. He's a specialist in customer experience management, CRM, and other related subjects. He has consulted and has had the privilege of working with businesses in diverse sectors, engaging stakeholders to implement actionable improvements that enhance customer experience and drive profitability. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Peter.
Thanks for having me, Danny. It's nice to meet you.
Same here. So, before we dive into our interview with Peter, don't forget to subscribe to Engati to get access to exclusive content from thought leaders around the globe. Thank you so much, Peter, for joining us. So, beginning with the first question, how would businesses deliver great experiences for B2B? And what are some of the B2B customers' top key performance indicators?
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question to start with. And just in case anybody's listening, not quite sure what the terms mean, B2B refers to business, and B2C refers to business to consumer. So in this interview, I'm really focusing on that B2B, the business to business. So where your customer is actually another company rather than an individual or a very small business where effectively it is just an individual working. In my experience, a great customer experience is got to be in the context of long-term relationship when it's business to business, rather than just selling stuff, rather than just, what's your order this week? And so as in order to deliver a great customer experience, it's got to be on that bedrock of long-term relationship rather than just transactional. Obviously, there are some businesses that are purely transactional, but good B2B is about becoming a trusted advisor or a subject expert in what you're doing that actually helps add value then to that business client. The second part of your question was about top 3 key performance indicators, and we've done a lot of work on this, and the 3 things that are foundational to good business to business experience are trust, what we call interdependence, so not just dependency one side, but actually working together, co-creating, jointly developing plans and strategies, and then what we call equitability. So is it fair commercially on both sides? So the best B2B businesses have those 3 things: high levels of trust, good interdependence, and it works commercially for both sides, because then you have a stability for that long-term relationship to continue.
Absolutely. And I think all 3 of them go hand in hand also. If you have trust, you'll be able to co-create and everything will fall in place. Absolutely.
Absolutely. That's why trust came first.
Yes.
Yes.
Correct. So, any tips on how do we overcome the B2B CX challenges?
Yeah, so three things to it. Again, within B2B, outside in thinking. Now, I'm not sure if watchers are familiar with this, but basically putting yourself in your customer's shoes, walking the processes that you have, and to have that outside in thinking in the way that you approach customer experience in B2B. It's especially important in B2B when you consider things like there's legal, there's compliance, there's contracts. Now, obviously, there's contracts in B2C as well, but it's not the same thing. And indeed, there may be elements with certification or homologation, and so many of these in B2B organizations have actually been designed for what the supplier needs to cover their backs, if you see what I mean. Uh, and they haven't done that outside in thinking to walk through those processes to actually make them customer friendly. Another kind of buzzword that there is around is this ETDB, easy to do business. And actually, it's those things that need overcoming to actually make it easy for your customer to deal with you. Secondly, quickly, just think about it. How is it that companies who claim to be customer focused actually make it so difficult for their suppliers to do business with them and actually treat them pretty badly? And that's a challenge. That's a challenge for people watching, in companies. If you claim to be customer focused, you need to think about your suppliers as well, because they are part of your value chain. And thirdly, just on this, so this is about overcoming CX challenges. One of the biggest things is short-termism. And if you as a business have a sales culture which is all about your quarterly sales or your monthly sales, people stand and fall just by the moment, just by how you're doing now, actually that could damage your customer experience. Because if there's a toxic sales culture of short-termism, you've got to be really careful that people don't damage and compromise the customer experience in order to hit their targets. And that's a really serious thing in B2B that obviously doesn't appear as much in B2C.
Correct, absolutely. So, moving on to our next question, Peter. How drastically do customer experience programs vary when we talk about B2B to B2C? And are there any differences or are there any similarities in the two of them?
Yeah, I'm conscious of maybe watchers who have kind of heard of this thing called P2P, and basically they're saying B2C and B2B aren't as important now because it's all person to person, and of course I get that, and there is truth in that we have to treat everyone as a human, and whether it's in B2C or B2B. However, I would assert that there are still some material differences between B2C and B2B that you've got to get right in your planning and in your customer experience management. Uh, these are significances. So here's just a few examples of what's different. So there are similarities in that it is person to person, but there are also differences. In B2B, there are multiple stakeholders. There's decision makers. Not everyone who's dealing with you is a decision maker. You have account management structures and teams. You have many to many relationships on both sides. And of course, there are different levels of seniority within both the client and the supplier side. So there is a complexity there that doesn't really happen in B2C. B2B is still more personal. And I just summarize that to say in B2C, your relationship tends to be with the brand. It's a brand level. Whereas in B2B, the relationship often has a name, and it's your account manager, and of course they may change occasionally, but it is essentially more personal. There are other material differences about B2B. There are RFQs and RFPs. That's request for proposals or quotations. There's a whole pitching process, beauty parades, as they're sometimes called. There's multi-year contracts. There's service level agreements to me. So there are material differences to the actual customer journey. And as I've mentioned before, there's sometimes regulatory compliance things, hoops that have to be filled in, your paperwork, etc., etc. Sometimes you have to prototype, so all of these things need to be built into the B2B customer journey that are materially different. And the final thing I'd say about this is a more general point, is B2C is often about churn. And even though, so that's attrition and an acquisition, and I don't want to make it impersonal, but in B2C, we may talk about loving the individual customer, but at the end of the day, if we gained more than we lost at the end of the month, we've done quite well. Obviously, the other way around, we haven't done well. And it can become a little bit impersonal and faceless. And obviously, that's a huge challenge for B2C to make it personal and human. But in B2B, it's always been more about value and account value. So if you have a 3-year contract, well, you're not going to lose that person or that company, until the end of that 3-year, and then you have a re-pitching, re-tendering process. So it's much more about account value and long-term profitability than it is about churn, where actually, even if companies say it, they don't mind. As long as they've gained more customers than they've lost, they don't really mind that much about who they lost. So that's the final point on that one.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think both of them have their pros and cons when we talk about them, B2B and B2C, both of them. So, talking about a voice of customer program, if we have to build an effective voice of customer program, what are the few things that we need to keep in mind?
Yeah, I'll try and keep this short. This is a big subject, and we can spend all the time on this. So, just thinking about this, two kind of things really came to mind to me. So, I've already made the point in business to business that there are many to many relationships. Certainly in big business to business, you may have an account team and some specialists and some support people, all working together as an account team to then service multiple stakeholders within your B2B client. Now, I've just seen this as a professional in this area for 35 years now, that many voice of the customer kind of programs are actually designed with the decision maker in mind, and in many ways they kind of pick up from B2C from that point of view, but actually that's missing a lot of people. So either they don't get asked at all, so there's other stakeholders, influencers within your client business who we need to find out what the relationship is like with them, but either they get missed or they get asked questions that people go, well, it doesn't really apply to me, that question, so you tend to then get kind of fudged answers. Either they don't answer at all or they answer as if they were, but that's not real. So think about it. And now that may mean it's slightly more complicated. You may need to ask some different questions to people who aren't the decision makers within the relationship, but just think about the value that you'll get, and potentially things that you will uncover from asking those people that you wouldn't have got if you just if you try to oversimplify. I think that's the point. I wish it was simple. B2B by definition is more complex, and actually our voice of the customer programs need to reflect that. So the second point, and this some people may not thank me or may not like me for saying this, but just think about Net Promoter Score and its relevance for all of those stakeholders. So I'm agnostic about Net Promoter Score. Some clients use it to great effect. Others don't like it, and they're more about ease of doing business or trust or long-term relationship. There's lots of different things that can be done. And what I tend to advise my clients and people who listen to me and things like this is to just put your feet in the shoes of those different stakeholders and clients, and think about is the Net Promoter Score actually relevant? Now, there may be some people saying, of course it's relevant. It's the one, it's the golden question, and it's okay to hold that view. But just think about, particularly in business to business, which is what I'm talking about, if you're my supplier and I absolutely love your service, would I really recommend you to my competitors? Because actually I want I want the competitive advantage that you are enabling me to give. So would I recommend you? No, I want you to myself. I don't want other people to have. And similarly, there are people within the organization. So again, if you take this view of there are multiple, it's many to many, there are people who are influencers, there are people who are stakeholders, and actually it's their job to be impartial. They may be in the purchasing department. To ask them if they'd recommend you is actually compromising their professional integrity, because that's not their job. Their job is to be impartial and to help the business choose the best supplier for them. So I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying just think about it in the B2B context as to whether it works for you.
Absolutely, absolutely correct. Very rightly said, Peter. So, also talking about omni-channel experiences, what are the barriers you think that a business can come across, and how can we conquer them?
Omnichannel, that's one of those buzzwords of the moment, isn't it? And again, just in case people aren't kind of aware, it actually, I think it goes back to the Latin. So we used to have single channels of media, basically, and all the control was with a company. And then new things opened up. We started having call centers and things like that. We went multi-channel. So that just means that there were multiple channels available to us. Omnichannel is a relatively new kind of concept, which basically says any channel. So omni just means any possible channel that a client may want to use to communicate or transact with you, we need to adapt to that. Now, I actually like the term omnichannel because it's customer centric. It's multi-channel is the channels that we choose to serve you, whereas omnichannel is we're open for business. You throw it at us and we'll take it. And we'll adapt to the channels that you prefer. So I like it as a term. There's really only one point in this. Again, we could speak about this for hours, but the biggest barrier that I have come across working with clients all over the world is silo thinking. It's how we're organized inside ourselves. If we have silo thinking and silo behavior going on in businesses, then we are going to really struggle with our omnichannel strategy. So some businesses even set up internally their channels to compete with each other. And that is so last century thinking. That fosters performance if it's just kind of numbers that you're after, but it does not foster an omnichannel customer experience. In fact, it hampers it greatly. And there's another thing which is maybe less kind of planned. It's almost an unintended consequence, but I just really encourage businesses to look internally at how people are performance managed and objectivized, because most large businesses will find, unless they've specifically looked at this, that unintentionally within their business there will be people who are effectively have objectives which are still single channel or multi-channel, and so they're good people trying to do a good job, but fundamentally they're not interested in what's going over there because they're delivering on their objective here, and that leads to a disconnected customer experience when you have lots of people, all good people trying to do the right thing, but they're doing it against the wrong or not joined up objectives. So that for me is the biggest thing to overcome. It's silo thinking, silo behavior, silo kind of based objectives. You know, somebody, I can't remember who said it, but somebody made a great quote that I heard and remembered, which is, there is only one share price, there is only one bottom line for any company. Do not set up bits of your business to compete with each other, because we should all be working for the same outcomes as a business.
Absolutely, very rightly said, Peter, and I'm sure our audience is gonna agree with you too. So, lastly, before we end up, any sound bites that you would like to leave our audience with?
Yeah, thanks. I had a little think about this, and there's really just two. Um, uh, the first one actually goes back to where we started about trust, and it has struck me, and it's stuck with me, and it's so sad. And really, the soundbite is, why do people only talk about trust after they've lost it? And if you think about it, that is so true. When you hear companies, you know, and we've seen scandals all over the world, and they all, you know, after they've had the disaster, the chief executive or somebody, you know, goes on the television and says, we're going to rebuild trust with our customers and our stakeholders and our, you know, our community. And it's like, what a shame they weren't talking about it before it all went wrong. So yeah, why is it? And please start thinking about it and building it now, before you have to make those horrible statements. So that's the first thing. The second thing, people won't know, I actually started my business at Rolls-Royce and Bentley, the car manufacturer. So I worked client side. It's now Bentley, because Rolls-Royce and Bentley split, but I worked when they were still Rolls-Royce and Bentley together for nearly 18 years. And a quote of the founder of Rolls-Royce, Henry Royce, has stuck with me. He said, whatsoever is rightly done, however humble, is noble. And that's just stuck with me. It's like, so much about customer experience isn't about fancy tech and, you know, and to be honest, some of it isn't about wowing and delighting customers. It's about doing the right thing. It's about consistently delivering the basics well in a human way. And that's just struck with me as a quote. And Henry Rice said, you know, whatever, if you do it right, even if it's a humble thing, even if it's just one of the basics, if you do it right, if you do it well, it's a noble thing to do. And that's just struck with me as a kind of underpinning customer experience, and particularly in B2B as well. It will pay back in the long term. Let's focus on doing the right things, on treating customers fairly, on helping them through this horrible pandemic that we're going through, because that's a noble thing to do, and it will pay dividends. It's not bad business. It's not very short-termist, but it's actually a good thing to do to build those long-term relationships that underpin the whole thing. So yeah, that's me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Peter, for giving us your time. Your insights were really valuable, and I know our audience is really going to enjoy this interview.
You're welcome.
So we'll be back with a new episode and with a brand new expert soon. So stay tuned, and we'll see you around for the next one. Thank you.
Bye.